Welcome to Well-Behaved Women. I am Kyria Phillips, joined by Lauren Schill.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second Pride episode. Don't talk to us about it being July. We don't care. Pride Month is longer. Pride is longer than June.
Pride Month is every day.
Yep.
Have the spirit of Pride Month in your heart.
Carry it with you. So welcome, everybody. I hope you are doing well. Who are we talking about today?
All right. So this week we're talking about the person that is probably best known for starting the Stonewall Riots.
In actuality.
Yes.
Versus
and this is why we're talking about three different women in this three-part series, because there are two of them that are widely known to have been there. And then there's the one that, like, most of the... There's two that are rumored to have started it, and then there's one that, like, people think actually started it.
Oh.
Yeah. So, on this year in history, we think. The people of Constantinople started adapting from the Arabic script to the Latin script and started to call their city Istanbul.
Constantinople.
Istanbul, Constantinople. Why did Constantinople get the works? That's everybody's business with the Turks.
I have such a vivid memory of being in 6th grade social studies class and my
listening to this
playing that song, or my my social studies teacher playing that song. And like, that's the only memory I have of ever hearing that song in full.
Istanbul, Istanbul, Istanbul.
As an 11-year-old, so
yeah,
20 years ago. That's
this whole weird history lesson about how it changed, and you're like, what the hell?
Yeah. And I've never heard it in full again. Like,
right? That's a song that plays on Gary's playlists a lot, so it comes up a lot. It's great. We like blast it whenever it's in the car.
That's very fun.
In April, the Spanish flu ended with a death toll of anywhere between 17 to 50 million dead.
Yay.
Remember that one time that we didn't have a pandemic and that flu didn't wipe out millions and millions of people?
Oh my God, what a nightmare.
17 to 50 million people.
But also like a huge range. Like, I know that there's a huge range. And
like the pandemic that we're dealing with, it reached everyone. It knew no bounds. It knows no wealth. It knows no poverty. It knows no race. Nothing. No genders. Nothing.
I'm listening to the last podcast episodes on the Black Plague. One, they're disgusting. Very gross episodes because the Black Plague was gross. But it's so interesting how we don't change. Humanity just doesn't change. At all. Like, this happened in the 1300s, and I'm just sitting here listening to it like, that just sounds like now, but with horses. Like,
I'm pretty sure there's been like a major pandemic every, 100 to 200 years?
I think so.
A while, something like that. Don't quote me. I probably got that wrong.
Yeah, don't come after us. And
shut up.
Leave us alone. This is a history podcast.
Okay, the 19th Amendment of the U.S. is ratified, guaranteeing the rights of women to vote.
Yay!
And we get Storme de Laverie in 1920.
I love that name.
I know. So while we can't be certain of the day or even the year of Storme's actual birth, she estimated it to be around December 24th, 1920. Christmas Eve.
What's her name? Storme?
Storme. Yeah, I looked it up, and I was thinking it was Storm, but, you know.
Oh, I more meant like
on the storm, and I thought it was so clever, but no, they pronounce it Storme.
I guess my question was more like, is that what she was born as? Like, is that what her parents named her? Oh, okay.
Yes. Her birth name is Storme.
Oh, that's lovely. I don't think of that as like a 1920s name.
No. She was the daughter of a black housemaid in New Orleans and her white employer.
Great.
Super fun.
We love to hear it.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
At that time in history, interracial birth certificates were definitely not a thing, so she just didn't have one.
That's wild.
I know, isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
She received no end of bullying for being a mixed-race child and was treated as such. Her beatings became so severe that eventually her father took her out of public school and sent her to private schools just to escape.
Wow. So you said her dad is the one that pulled her out of school?
Yes.
Do we have any information about, like, his relationship with her, being that he was white and...
Apparently it was pretty good. He really loved her mom, and when it was legal for whites and blacks to get married, they did, and then they moved to California.
Oh, okay.
So at some point, that was something that they wanted to do. Like, he wanted to be with her. So. Oh,
okay. Well, then I take back my sarcastic comment at the top when you said that it was a black.
I mean, it's kind of sketch.
I mean, it's still sketch because she was an employee. Yeah, she was employed by him. Still sketch. So there's obviously like some power dynamic. But
also, she's from New Orleans, so like there's very much this is still the old South. They're still in plantations. There's still a very high ratio of black house servants to white male employers.
There's absolutely power dynamics going on there, and I'm not the person to like forgive this man.
Right.
But I'm also not in the business of typically giving men credit, but I'll give him a little bit.
But for what this is, he was committed to this woman, and they did get married and moved to California together so that they could kind of escape the
shitty
parts of being married interracially in the South.
Yeah. Okay.
She was a very talented athlete and a musician as a child. Storme was blessed with a beautiful baritone voice, and she loved to ride horses. In fact, she was so talented, she went and did what Gary did, which was run away and join the circus. She jumped side saddle with the Ringling Brothers when she was a teenager.
Love that. That's so cool.
Yeah. It was unknown if she had that in mind at the time as a long-term career move, but she broke her leg badly as a teenager, so she had to stop.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. At the age of 18, Storme knew that she was a lesbian. She moved to Chicago because she feared if she'd stayed in the South, she would get murdered.
Yeah.
Which is a legitimate fear.
Yeah.
In the 1940s, in Chicago. Mm-hmm. In the 1940s there, she sang as Stormy Dale, performing with her beautiful baritone voice. Then, in 1946, according to one source, she went on vacation to Miami, where she was visiting Danny Brown and Doc Brenner. At the time, they were running Danny's Jewel Box. This would go on to become the Jewel Box in Greenwich Village. It was during this visit that they told her they needed help with a show that they put on.
All right.
She got a lot of guff for considering it. She really couldn't do drag. She was a woman, and it would ruin her reputation.
Mm-hmm.
She did it anyway. Storme signed up for 6 months, and it became 14 years. All she had to do was be herself.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was going to ask, was she performing as a drag king or performing as herself? Oh, okay.
Quote, all I had to do was just be me and let people use their imaginations, end quote. She said it was very easy to make this into a 14-year thing.
Aww.
When she got involved with Danny and Doc's show, she moved to New York and got involved with the LGBT scene before it really was a thing. She joined in the drag show as the Lone Drag King. From 1955 to 1969, she was part of the wildly popular Harlem drag show, the Jewel Box Revue.
I love it.
I know! She was part of the cast labeled 25 Men and a Girl. They performed 4 times a day and were wildly popular in the local Harlem crowd.
4 times a day, wow.
4 times a day. On stage, she would don a beard or a mustache, dressing in tuxes and fitting the part of the MC as well.
We love to see it.
I know. As king, he'd introduce and style with the drag queens on stage. Then there was a fun little ditty called A Surprise with a Song, and she'd be revealed by the end of the show.
That is so awesome.
I know! She gets to do her own little thing, and she's very good at it. The pictures of her in drag are just fabulous.
Yeah, and gets to be present throughout the entire show because she's emceeing, you said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's so fun.
And I will not promise to be perfect on every occasion as with last episode and this episode and next episode especially. I'm going to screw up a lot. There's a lot of identity politics that go on. There's a lot of different labeling. There's a lot of pronoun confusions. So again, I'm going to try, when Storme is dressed as Drag King, I try to refer to Storme as him. But most of the time, Storme was just a lesbian.
Yeah.
Pretty much only when she was on stage was King around.
Yeah.
So one of the things that made Storme so unique was the way that she dressed, not only on stage, but off.
Oh, really quickly, sorry, I just saw here, and I don't know if you said it, but the Jewel Box Revue was the first racially integrated drag review, which I think is really cool.
Yes.
So that's really wonderful. Anyways, go ahead, sorry.
No, I think that's awesome. It's one of those, like, that just makes it even more enjoyable.
Like, that's a person that is living through history, that probably doesn't realize they're living through history.
First drag king.
Yeah.
Yep.
So cool.
Great. Because of the way that she dressed, she was continually getting in trouble for not wearing enough feminine clothing. So let's go back to that last episode for a second and talk about that 3-piece rule that I mentioned.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That a woman at a bar must be wearing at least 3 pieces of feminine clothing at a time. If they weren't, often they would be arrested. It was, after all, the perfect time in history where you couldn't be black almost anywhere, and you definitely couldn't be gay openly, and there were only a few areas that would accept a lady dressed masculinely there to be around the gay crowd.
And you said this was 50s, 60s.
Yep.
Time period.
Yes. So she was just always getting in trouble for one reason or another, but often for wearing too many masculine pieces of clothing. But it became a style. A huge style. To this day, we have the term butch because of people like Storme.
Okay, yeah.
He really got the, jeans look, the androgyny look really down. Very popular. So she stopped giving a fuck, eventually, about whether or not she got in trouble with the police. It just didn't matter. She'd be arrested in drag. She'd be arrested out of drag. Why be worried about it at all? What was the fucking point?
Right. No.
It's insane.
They don't like me, so who cares? Like,
it's me, not my clothing. That's the mask behind which they are hiding.
Yeah.
As GQ put it, quote, her publicity photographs show a dandyish approach to zoot suits and black tie. She wore a shawl collar tuxedo flanked by 3 female impersonators in glittery gowns. In headshots, straightening her French cuffs in an impressive set of cufflinks. In another, she wears a modestly cut zoot suit and holds a pipe, a fedora cocked on her head. Prior to her time with the Jewel Box, she's said to have worked in Chicago as a bodyguard to the mobsters, and one wonders if she picked up or offered some style tips.
I love that fashion.
I know. It's great.
Like, whatever that chunk of fashion is, just like the androgyny, the unisex styles. I'm really loving that.
Well, I definitely love, like, a good dress. Most of my clothes pretty much throughout my life have been fairly androgynous in style.
Yeah.
I'm just more casual, more comfortable.
Yeah. And I love seeing, like, women in, like, I had to look up pictures of, like, what a zoot suit was specifically, and, like, looking at, like, the baggy pants with the belt and then, like, a blazer over it. I love women in that look. Like, I think it's such a cool look.
Have you seen pictures of Zendaya in the zoot suit?
Yes.
Phenomenal.
So good.
They're just fabulous. They're fabulous.
Yeah. Such cool fashion items.
So, like you said earlier, the review was part of a historical, monumentous occasions in their own right. Not only did it have integrated cast, but it also drew crowds of both black and white audiences.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the show was so popular, it performed at the Apollo in Harlem.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
During all of this time, she had a partner.
Oh.
She was a dancer named Diana, of whom really not much is known. But they were together until Diana's death in 1970, and Storme always kept a photo of Diana in her wallet.
That's so sweet.
I know. One of my absolute favorite facts about Storme, and I will talk about this later on as well, is that she was known well into her 80s for roaming the streets of the lower 7th and 8th and checking in lesbian bars, patrolling the area for what she called, quote, ugliness. Any form of intolerance or bullying of her baby girls was met with the very definition of butch, legally armed and ready to throw the fuck down.
Into her 80s. That's incredible. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. She was not to be fucked with.
What a badass woman.
Yeah, it was crazy. Quote, she literally walked the streets of downtown Manhattan like a gay superhero.
That's what, just like gay vigilante justice.
Gay vigilante. Wonderful. It's fantastic. I'm going to make this a safe space, and that will involve violence for you.
Yeah.
During this time, because of that, she also worked as a bouncer in multiple bars in the neighborhood.
I love her.
I'm going to mention this later just because it's so, like, it's just such a cool fact.
Is this episode called The Storme is Coming?
Pardon?
Is this episode called The Storme is Coming?
I was thinking A Dark and Stormy Night.
Oh, okay, yes. And I was like, or Riders on the Storme. Like,
yesterday was going to be, when I thought it was pronounced Storm, I was like, Gary, guess what the title of my episode is called? He's like, what? And I said, Riders on the Storm. And he goes, had to be done.
But yeah, A Dark and Stormy Night is so good.
Yeah, you'll see why.
All right.
Elsewhere in gay news.
In gay news. Gays across the world.
So last episode, I talked about kind of how the late 60s was just a very big clusterfuck of political turmoil and people of color and women and gay people starting to assert their rights as human beings for the very first time. And because there's so much to focus on, and I cannot get all of this out in I couldn't get it all out in one episode. I can't get it all out in two. So we're going to kind of divide the specific beginner gays movement into the 3 episodes. So right now I'm going to take this as an opportunity to do a beginner's deep dive into just the pre-civil rights environment for gay people. So while Black people were starting to be allowed to vote and take the same entrances as white people by the late 60s, we had far longer to go to get to the level of acceptance in the community that we do even now. Mm-hmm. Most Blacks were still seen as secondary, not as important. They had rights, but just barely. People that were biracial, like Storme, were subversions of whatever race she was trying to identify with, which is a really hard part of being biracial in general. Neither side ever fully claims you. You don't feel like you can be total. I mean, I'm not biracial, so I will not speak for everyone, but the reports.
Based on what you've gotten.
Based on the information that I've had and pretty much any article that I've read from people that are talking about this as a community, it is very hard to be accepted fully by either group when you're biracial. Yeah. At least historically. I think we all have the same idea that the fact of being gay for most of American history and most history around the world just was really, really shitty to survive. I got lost in a rabbit hole of an article that spelled out so succinctly exactly the big points to remember here. So even though I'm really sure that most of you know this, I'm just going to share this anyway because it was a really good lecture. For a long time, the hatred of gays was far more permeated and violent in New York and everywhere.
Right.
In a non-representative survey taken in 1974 that asked over 1,000 self-identified gay men in the U.S., over 2/3 of them concealed their homosexuality from most or all heterosexuals. 24% agreed with the statement, "I wish I were not homosexual." 41% often felt lonely, reports of low self-respect, feelings of valuelessness, uselessness. Over half said that if people found out they were gay, it would have significant impacts on their ability to keep social relations. They knew that they'd lose a lot of their friends, maybe all of them.
So when you talk about the good old days...
This is what the good old days looked like.
Remember who they were good for.
Quote, because society's attitudes are internalized, homosexuals develop a great sense of guilt about themselves. Guilt, in turn, produces self-hatred, and those who hate themselves find it difficult not to despise others who share their guilt. Such a syndrome is the major reason for the difficulty so many homosexuals have in relating to each other, the obsessive search for new partners, and the one-night stands. It was this horrible perpetuating cycle. There was so much self-hate and then rage with yourself for hating yourself. God forbid you see someone else in the world living their own gay life out in the open, and you're thinking, how dare they expose such a private and shameful thing? They get to live like I wish I could, and that exposes a deep, deep hatred for that person.
Yeah, that internalization, it's, I've been seeing it a lot on, you can cut this out if you want, but I've been seeing it a lot on ex-Mormon TikTok too, where it's like, people are just furious because they're like, oh shit, like you're living the life that like I was told was not possible. And I'm furious at you for it.
Yeah. There was a post, and I don't know who posted it, but they were talking about how their mom had basically emailed them and said, we pray for you every day. We hope that you're going to come back. You know, you really need to be reading your scriptures. You really need to be doing this and that. You're listening to the wrong kind of music. Think Green Day, but not
sure.
Like, yeah, horrible shit, right?
I just feel like we're so past the point. Like, when I hear stuff like this, it baffles me because we're so past the point where we're like, music causes bad. Like,
haven't we figured it out? Mormons haven't, though. Mormons really haven't. They live in a little bubble of self-perpetuated information, of confirmation bias from everyone else. There was one that I even saw, one of the highest leaders of the church, his son kind of gave a talk at a university a couple of years ago, and they were talking about the fact that the Book of Abraham was factually disproven. Like, this is factually untrue. And so the guy was like, my dad's an important person. I'll call him up and have him help me figure out how to refute it. And so he calls his dad up and he's like, give me the logic behind what this is. And the dad's like, I don't have any. Do you feel good about it? And that was all he needed. It's like, Jesus. Yeah, I feel good about it. God forbid someone feel good about murder. Like,
yeah, right. Jesus.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, but the internalized phobia across the board, internalized misogyny, internalized racism, like that is a very common trend that we see in marginalized communities.
Yeah, that's why we see, I mean, and so many people that are depressed because they're not living the lives that they want to live. And people can't figure out why they're depressed. And it's because they live in a community that doesn't allow them to be the person that they actually are.
Right.
Quote, they have allowed themselves to be poisoned by the stereotype that others have of them, and they live in fear that their acts will correspond to this stereotype. There was a huge effort made from most people towards being passing, which means trying to pass off as a straight person.
Yeah.
Many gay men had, and still have, wives and children, fearing exposure of that dirty little secret.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, for some gay people, the desire to pass became almost a compulsive obsession. These people could either not bear to think of themselves as homosexual or have others doubt their heterosexuality. So to help conceal their identities, gay people have sometimes been the first to endorse homophobic ideologies. There were so many anti-gay laws that Illinois was the only state that had repealed their anti-sodomy laws by the late 60s.
Holy shit.
We had the Gayola scandal in the beginning of the 60s, which was this bribery, caught in the act for trying to pay off the mafia and the police at gay bars in LA.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Or San Francisco.
But similar to what you were mentioning about New York, where the gay bars would pay off the mob for protection.
That specific scandal was, I think, in San Francisco, but that was a very common thing at every gay bar. Yeah. We also had the Mattachine Societies of the area, which was an LGBT group from the LA area that had spread and had chapters on the East Coast.
Okay.
And I'll kind of talk about them in a little while. So basically, gay activism was barely getting a foothold in the late 60s when Stonewall happened. And the story that Storme is perhaps most well known for is her involvement with the revolution of the LGBT community in 1969. Again, I mentioned this event last episode, and there are multiple varying accounts of what actually went down that night, but Storme was confirmed to have been at Stonewall Inn that night as it happened. I introduced that in our last episode. It was a very well-known gay bar in the neighborhood of Greenwich Village, which was kind of the artist paradise. It was a haven for artists, musicians, cross-dressers, and pretty much anyone who hadn't fit in their own small-minded hometowns. Stonewall was no different. In fact, it was before its time in a few respects. Although there were lesbian groups as well as gay groups on the West Coast, the New York gay scene was the scene to be a part of. But they were exclusive to their own, mostly to protect the gays in the area. The Inn was a shitty, dirty, overrun mafia-owned club, but it was accepted of the deviated deviants.
Yeah.
It was one of the first places that allowed women and drag queens into the clubs, and it became a safe space for them.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of.
Sure. The safest for them to go out in.
One of the safest of the spaces, yeah. I mentioned the raids. The mafia made deals with the local law enforcement of the area. The gayola fee was paid and the bar was tipped off if there was something going down, if there was going to be a late night raid, or they would be early enough in the evening. Nobody showed up yet. Didn't matter.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about the police forces of the time and the goals of the police force.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, the late 60s saw a huge effort from the police to suppress the scourge that was the homosexual problem in
Jesus
Greenwich.
Christ.
Yeah. You're going to say that a lot.
My mom was born that year. My mom was born in 1969. And so, yeah, the people that are like, it was so long ago. People don't feel that way now. No. Stonewall happened the year my mother was born.
Mm-hmm.
Her father was a Baptist preacher. What the fuck do you think she grew up learning? And I mean, my mom is not that person anymore, but it was not that long ago. My mother was born the same year that this event happened, and millions of other people were too, and so many of them were raised in shitty homophobic homes. And it was just not that long ago. And it's just.
And we're thinking about this as a, society-wide issue, but okay, gay people are everywhere. But the places that they had actually figured out how to start gathering were the major metropolitan areas in huge cities across the U.S. Tiny towns aren't going to have a gay scene.
Yeah.
And they're definitely not going to have the kind of education that would allow one to be accepting of a gay scene. Yeah. It gets worse and worse the further inland you go, the further away from society you go.
Yeah. I mean, we see that here in Seattle. You could go 40 minutes out of town and drive down a road and see 4 Trump flags. You don't have to get far out of major cities to start seeing where ideologies change.
Trumpism is a cult.
Yeah.
Full stop. You're part of the Trump supporters. You are in a cult. Please call your local Democrat and figure out how to get away.
Call your local ex-Mormon for advice on how to escape.
Mormon, and I will help you figure that out.
Help escaping a cult. Okay, so Stonewall. Oh, the police force. That's what you were.
Yes. So we've got the homosexual problem in Greenwich. In the mid-60s, the city started giving back protections to some of the bars in the area, even though they knew it was a gay or lesbian bar. Cops didn't care. They made life hell for anyone involved in that crowd, no matter what. We're not supposed to get you into trouble, but we like it. We have fun with it, so we're just going to do it anyway.
We don't care about your rights, and we're bored.
You say that. Just wait. You're going to get pissed. The Public Morals Squad that had been put together by our favorite NYPD department, Vice, was a shitbag group of cops that would take extreme subversive members to catch gay people and throw them out, or assault them, or both. Cops.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was that? Say something moral squad?
Public Morals Squad.
Public Morals Squad. Gross.
PMS.
That is that is some Handmaid's Tale shit.
Right? It's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck. Okay, so quick sidebar. There's obviously a lot of videos going around of cops being assholes because guess what? Cops are fucking assholes. I saw this video of this lady that got pulled over, and I don't know why they pulled her over, but basically the cop tried to reach inside her window to open her door for her, and so she was like, please don't reach in here. And so she's trying to roll her window up. And so he just pulled his arm out, pulled a baton out, and smashed her window.
Oh my God.
Got glass all in her mouth. Like, she was fucking bleeding from her face.
Holy shit.
Drags her into his car and drives just a little ways off. You can see, like, there are fucking 15 cop cars now around this one car. There's protesters that are starting to gather because you have smashed a window for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Basically, there was a traffic violation, and they wanted to detain her for a traffic violation because that's what you're supposed to do, right?
That's
traffic violation.
Oh my God.
So he pulls her forward in his car. They're sitting, and she is screaming that she needs an ambulance, that she is bleeding. She needs help. And so he gets out of the car. He goes out back to the back door. He opens it up. And she is, like, leaning out of the car so that she can spit blood out of her fucking mouth.
Yeah.
He was like, why did you roll the window up on me? And she goes, because I was scared of you. Cops have been hitting and beating and killing people that look like me. And here we are.
Jesus Christ. Where was this?
I rolled my window up because I was scared of getting exactly this position that I'm in right now. I think it was in Orange County.
Jesus.
Yeah, ridiculous. Absolutely insane. Anyway, back to 1969. This public moral squad decided to raid the Stonewall. Instead of raiding it early, cops wanted to get in late, or really, really, really early in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
They sent 4 plainclothes officers into the bar, confirmed what was happening, and then bust was on.
Jeez.
These cops, they're so big, catching people themselves and punishing them for exactly who they are. Woohoo. Big tough badass.
Yeah.
Oh, this was the best part. Did I mention there is no intel about this raid having been scheduled in any way, shape, or form? It just happened. They volunteered to do this.
That's what I was gonna, like, based on what you were kind of, like, saying about them, it sounded like they did several off-the-books raids so that they didn't have to document their bullshit behavior. Jackasses.
I mentioned last week, and I will mention again, there were rules with these raids. The cops would ID themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The lights would go up, and if you were caught inside, you had to line up. Then the cops would go down the line and check clothing and IDs.
Yeah.
A lot of these people were ex-military, and that was the ID that they had with them.
Oh, fuck.
IDs with male name. Yeah, okay. Big trigger warning, and I'm sorry. IDs with male names being handed over by trans women and drag queens arrested. Women wearing less than 3 pieces of effeminate clothing arrested. Men and women both without an ID arrested. Female police officers would take people dressed as women to identify their genitals. And then if they were deemed to be cross-dressing,
arrested.
There may or may not have been a very large number of those queer youth that just didn't have IDs that night.
Yeah.
Arrested. Storme was in the bar when the lights went up. Now, Storme was known, again, for her specific fashion, to the point that it permeated the fashion industry today and the lesbian movement for just decades to come.
Right.
She also, remember, never had a birth certificate, so it's very hard to have an ID.
I was going to bring that up earlier, but then I was like, wait, she was born in 1920, so maybe things were different. But yeah, I did have that thought earlier that, like, she didn't have a birth certificate, so how does she go about getting, like, legal identification?
Exactly.
And then I shuffled it away because I was like, maybe things were different in the 20s.
They weren't. They were as bad as you would imagine.
That's just, it's so great. Like, we're not going to give you a birth certificate because you're a mixed person. And then, like, okay, how am I supposed to identify myself anywhere?
My mom was not allowed to get a license in Utah because she didn't have her birth certificate. She had her adoption birth certificate.
Oh, that's
They told her she wasn't a person. They were like, you don't exist. We can't give you an ID. There's like, well, can I have my old ID back? Well, we took that one. That's invalidated now. Well, can you give me a new ID? No, you don't have the right birth certificate.
Does she have one now?
Yes, my dad had to literally gold badge his way into the DMV and go give my wife a fucking license right now.
Oh my God. That's incredible.
It was When he gets mad,
he's wild.
Real mad.
Yeah. Every time I have to do something legal to get like legal paperwork or documents, it's always a little weird because my birth certificate is technically a consular report of birth abroad because I was born in Spain.
Right.
And so it's like just a totally different document. And when I hand it to people, they always have like a processing face, like until they can be like, oh yes, this is an acceptable document. But I can just like see their eyes like, what am I looking at?
Yeah. God, that's gotta be so frustrating. My ex-husband had a really hard time with that, with his birth certificate and getting a passport for kind of the same reasons.
Yeah, same thing. I'm in that process right now. But all right, so Storme, no license, no identification.
Yep. Usually, the women are let out peacefully, but tonight a number of the women fought back against the police, and the men refused to produce their identification, so the cops did what all small dick energy bullshit artists do, and they decide, we're just going to arrest 205 people in here.
Holy shit, yeah.
Okay, let's separate the cross-dressers. They're going to go to the back of the bar. The police began to frisk the women in the bar, groping them inappropriately, and a sense of grossness leaked from person to person as the crowd slowly realized just how trapped and helpless they were against the cops. Mm. Some that somehow did pass the bullshit meter left the inn, but far from scampering away, they stayed around, needing to see what is happening with their friends. And of course, this crowd gathering produced more of a crowd gathering as the uncomfortable and unsafe feeling that permeated the inside as disgusting police groped handcuffed women spread outward like a bunch of gasoline poured out onto a street. Meanwhile, this is also a raid on the Stonewall liquor sales. The loophole that cops used were knowingly selling alcohol to gays, so the liquor supply, plus that extra stash in the car down the block I mentioned, took a lot of booze. The cops inside had to keep everyone inside until the transport came for the liquor. That had to be gone first. In the course of about 15 minutes, Deputy Inspector Seymour Pine noted the crowd outside the club had grown exponentially. Now the people inside that were under arrest were less than 1/10 of the crowd now gathered and agitated outside. There were some members of the crowd who took the opportunity to give the police no end of shit, saluting them in exaggeration. Quote, wrists were limp, hair was primped, and reactions to the applause were classic. The police were vastly outnumbered, and it was getting worse by the second. On the arrival of the first wagon, the crowd fell silent. A bungle in the communications delayed the arrival of the second wagon, much less a third or fourth. So the arrival between the two cars was marked. Into the first wagon was sent the mafia. They were driven out with the cheers from the crowd.
Wow.
Then came the employees. As they were loaded in and driven off, cries of "gay power" could be heard throughout the crowd. Mm-hmm. They sang "We shall overcome." And while most of the crowd was still maintaining joviality, one couldn't help but notice the shift in attitude. Mm. Author Edmund White, who had been passing by, recalled everyone's restless, angry, and high-spirited. No one has a slogan, no one even has an attitude, but something's brewing. Pennies, then beer bottles were thrown at the wagon as a rumor spread through the crowd that the patrons still inside were being beaten. Storme was one of many butch lesbians in the bar that night, and she was arrested. At around 1:20 in the morning, as Storme was let out in handcuffs, she fought back. Her handcuffs were too tight, so she said as much. So the cop hit her in the head with a baton.
That's what I do when somebody just makes a comment to me.
Never one to back down from a bunch of bad motherfuckers, Storme fought back not one, not two, but 4 different police officers.
Holy shit.
As she bled from her head wound, doing everything she could to escape, she screamed into the crowd, "Why don't you guys do something?" Mm-hmm. The police officer picked her up and tossed her into the paddy wagon.
Wow.
And the crowd went wild.
Oh, shit.
Quote, it was at that moment that the scene became explosive. Mm. This grew from a crowd to a full-on mob. The gay community's Rosa Parks. A spark for all that gasoline. Things went nuts. As the crowd closed in on the officers, their attentions were necessarily turned toward the incoming threat. Police abandoned those they had tossed into the wagon, choosing to try to beat back several other people. Inspector Pine decides to retreat, so 2 police cars and the second paddy wagon take off after numerous attempts to overturn the fucker, as well as some slashed tires. Someone yells out into the crowd that the inn must have been raided because they hadn't paid off the cops. In response was heard, "Let's pay them off!" So they hurled coins at the police. They threw beer cans at the cops, and the cops lashed out. Into a construction zone, they followed one group into the crowd and used a stack of bricks readily available to just hurl at the gays. This whole time, there was a whole other section of people that were still detained inside Stonewall because they had to bring out the many arrests in batches. So people are just staying in the bar while this is happening outside. 10 police officers barricaded themselves. Quote, "We all had a collective feeling like we'd had enough of this kind of shit. It wasn't anything tangible anybody said to anybody else. It was just kind of like everything over the years had come to a head on that one particular night in the one particular place, and it was not an organized demonstration. Everyone in the crowd felt that we were never going to go back. It was like the last straw. It was time to reclaim something that had always been taken from us. All kinds of people, all different reasons, but mostly it was just total outrage, anger, sorrow, everything combined. And everything just kind of ran its course. It was the police who were doing most of the destruction. We were really trying to get back in and break free, and we felt that we had freedom at last, or freedom at least to show that we demanded freedom. We weren't going to be walking meekly into the night and letting them shove us around. It's like standing your ground for the first time, and in a really strong way, and that's what caught the police by surprise. There was something in the air, freedom, a long time overdue, and we're going to fight for it. It took different forms, but the bottom line was we weren't going to go away, and we didn't."
Who said that?
Michael Fader is the man that said this.
So do we think that the reason, not the one reason, but like with it being Storme that was thrown in the back of the car, like right after she had said that, do we think it's because of who she was and she was like more well known?
It wasn't necessarily that she was more well known. It was because of the fact that she was a butch dyke lesbian in a gay bar without a proper ID.
Oh, no, I know. No, I understand that. I know why she was arrested. The sudden kickoff happening right after she was thrown in the car. Do we think that the response from the crowd is partially due, in fact, to the fact that she was so beloved?
No, it was because he called out and actually, so there are a couple, so my brain is gay mush right now. I have been learning about Marsha, and I'm learning about Silver now, and Storme, and all of this. There's like so many different accounts, but yes, Storme's screaming out into the crowd and getting tossed into the paddy wagon. According to a lot of the reports that I've read, like that was kind of the spark that lit the flame. But there are also other recounts that just because of all of this stuff happening and because of the general agitation, there were a bunch of things that were going on at once that all activated kind of around the same time. So like I would imagine that there was kind of a bit of a kerfuffle with some of the other butch lesbians that were also fighting back. Like I would imagine it was just kind of this one next, like a bunch of events happening right at the same time that helped trigger it right then.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it is a beautiful paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
People threw garbage cans, garbage, bottles, whatever they could find at police. The mob lit the garbage on fire, stuffing it through the broken windows of the Stonewall. They hooked up the fire hose, but there was very little water pressure, and what water did get sprayed only seemed to encourage the crowds. Soon enough, the tactical police force came to save the day of the cops. They ran to free the trapped police officers that were still inside the inn. Outside, things were fantastic. The crowd cheered, started impromptu kick lines and song to the tune of Tarara Boom Die. Okay, I'm going to sing and it's going to be awful. We are the Stonewall girls. We wear our hair in curls. We don't wear underwear. We show our pubic hair.
I love it.
Isn't it great? The crowd that formed this line faced up against the actual tactical force, receiving hell of a beatings, nightsticks to the head and back, all over the body. And still these people chanted and jumped their lines, and they endured beatings just for the chorus line.
Yeah.
Slowly, the crowd would be chased away one by one into the neighboring streets, until the only people parked on stoops around Christopher Street were the ones sitting in a daze about what the fuck just happened.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts? Let's talk about what all the things I just read, because that was a lot at one time.
Yeah, I feel like I interjected some, but my main thoughts were mostly just like how incredible it all was. Like, it's such a, I'm saying violent in terms of like the acts that occurred where like there was violence occurred, but I'm not calling the gay people there violent, just violence occurred. And I know that things like this still happen during protests, but it's so interesting to have this, like, I know that there are also different accounts of what happened, but just to have as much information as we do about it, is really incredible. And thinking about, I've just never been in that position where these people were feeling so desperate to just be able to like live their lives. Those are the big things that are standing out for me. It's just like, this has never been something that I've had to even consider actively fighting the police to just be who I want to be and live. So yeah, those are my big ones.
Yeah.
Just kind of standout thoughts from that. I am not shocked by the police behavior. It seems pretty par for the course for them to operate outside of their like normal bounds and to go after the most vulnerable.
It's a really, really, really good thing that we've had so much progression in the police departments since 1969, right?
Yeah, so good.
They're so much better now.
Just a ton of drastic changes and overhaul to the way that they do things, you know?
Their opinions of marginalized communities have just gotten so accepting and loving.
Stormy, starting fights.
Rumors quickly spread among the community about the actual start of the riots and the rape. 1, they had secretly been organized by the Students for the Democratic Society, an early far-left group against hierarchical structure. 2, the Black Panthers were responsible for the riots. 1 even went so far as to say the event was triggered by a homosexual police officer whose roommate went dancing at the Stonewall against the officer's wishes.
Huh. You know what? I would not, knowing what I know now about, like, internalized homophobia,
I think it was one of the ones that was like, you guys should do a raid tonight because my boyfriend is, I didn't want him to party tonight, but he's gonna, and he has to pay for it.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying it's 100% true, but if somebody was like, no, that's actually fact, I would be like, oh, okay. Like, I'm not entirely...
Like, it wouldn't be super surprising. That's not outside the realm of possibility here.
Yeah, that's not a wild conspiracy theory, like, the Earth is flat. Like,
the Earth isn't flat?
It's not, sorry. Fine. We will revisit this later.
However it started in people's minds at that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was what came next. For the next 4 days, riots, graffiti, and a mourning period set in. On the walls of skeletal remains of the Stonewall Inn, graffiti stating, "Drag power, they invaded our rights, support gay power, and legalize gay bars," began to appear.
Wow.
Surprisingly, the bar's status was also included in this barrage of supportive text.
Shaken that we started at legalized gay bars, and it took us until like 2015 to get to like legalized gay marriage.
Right?
God damn it!
This is the most depressing laughter we've had in a while. God,
like 1969 legalized gay bars. Like, can we just get that?
Let's stop there.
Oh my god.
So this illegal gay bar shared its status with the world through graffiti saying, "We are open."
Okay.
This is a burned out shell of a building.
Yeah.
Fuck it. The illusion of peace in Greenwich Village, and moreover with anyone abnormal, had been shattered. And with that came the shattering of windshields. A man named Craig Rodwell called the New York Times, the Daily News, and the Post to share what was happening. All three covered these riots. The Daily News even put it on their front page.
Wow.
After Craig did that, he and his partner created 5,000 leaflets to hand out around the neighborhood. One of them was titled, "Get the Mafia and the Cops Out of Gay Bars." Craig and his partner Fred Sargent argued that it was time for gays to start supporting gay businesses and establishments, and to boycott locations owned by the Mafia, like Stonewall. It also called for the mayor's office to investigate the intolerable situation with regard to the way that gays were treated by cops. All right, we're also going to take a step back for a moment. And also, we're going to look at the micro from the macro perspective. Mm-hmm. And let's realize the individual consequences that every single person involved was now facing. The majority of these people were closeted and passing. If the public or, God forbid, their families got wind of their perversion, their lives would be over, literally. Right. These are the people that have had to keep this part of themselves locked away in a tight little box where just no one can find it. And now this is news. And now their secret is just out there.
Right. So unsafe.
And I can only imagine with the internalized homophobia and the external, very open homophobia of the time, that it felt almost painful for them to have gone through that shock of now not being able to have that as a secret anymore. Yeah. And people did lose their jobs after being discovered through this. The second night, beat poet Allen Ginsberg said, "Gay power, isn't that great? It's about time we did something to assert ourselves." And he visited this open Stonewall Inn for the first time. While walking home, he declared to Lucian Truscott, "You know, the guys were so beautiful. They've lost that wounded look that all fags had 10 years ago."
Was this a gay person?
This is a gay person.
Okay.
Or I don't know. Allen Ginsberg.
Oh, yes. Okay. Allen Ginsberg. Oh, yes. Very famous person.
Gay rights. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. I was just looking it up. Allen Ginsberg was like a poet of the time, and he had a very long time partner. 45 years or something like that. I'm trying to do math. Yeah.
Math is hard.
Yeah. But yeah, sorry, I got stuck on the quote where it was just like, they are not as sad anymore. Like there's a little more pep in their step.
Yes. Your spine is standing a little bit straighter and your head is a little more level. Mm-hmm. Because maybe the person that's next to you, maybe the person that you're passing on the street, you saw them there too.
Right.
You saw them there fighting for the same thing that you were fighting for.
You're not as alone.
Your dirty little secret too, and I have a comrade in that.
Yeah.
It is now a neighborhood. It's now a community thing.
Yeah.
There is a lot of debate on which night, the first or the second, was the more violent of the two. But by the time the second night happened, the news had spread like wildfire to more groups than they were expecting. The same people showed up as the first night, but this time tourists, bystanders, and local police provocateurs had joined in the crowd. Mm-hmm. I've never heard of those.
Yeah.
The Stonewall was still in business, and the entire neighborhood rallied around them. Thousands of people choking Christopher Street until the crowd spilled into the adjoining blocks.
Wow.
They would stop buses and, traffic, screaming, "Gay power, gay rights."
Gay power. Yeah.
Great. The tactical police force was called again around 2 a.m., and the last of the crowds dispersed around 4 a.m. again. Again with the kick lines, again with the dances and the taunts, and again with a lot of garbage fires being set.
Yeah.
The next 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, were kind of rainy days, so the confrontations that did happen were fewer and farther between. You would like to think that all the gays in the area were happy about this news, that they were finally striking back, right?
Sure.
Right?
They're so pleased, right? They're thrilled. No.
Nope. Mm-mm. One of the early gay movement groups I've mentioned earlier in this episode, called the Mattachine Society, was trying to promote the idea that gays were just like normal people, and this horrid display of affection for such a sleazy bar in Greenwich Village of violence and effeminate nature, it was embarrassing.
Gays don't want to be like normal people.
Gays don't want to be like normal people, except for the gays that are trying to be as normal as they possibly can to get accepted into that community.
Yeah, but like as an overarching rule now, based on the people I interact with, like, they're like, no, I don't want to blend in. I don't fuck passing. Instead, I'm going to go the other way. I'd like to signal that I'm queer. Like, how do I do that?
God. So I read this article and I shared it with you. It's the JSTOR one. By the way, anyone, and the 5 people that actually listen to this show, get a free account on JSTOR and just figure out, just read stuff. Just find articles that sound interesting and educate yourselves, because these are phenomenal articles. But I was reading this one, and it was talking about, there was like a case study kind of 2 gay men that had wildly differing lifestyles. And this one was living out and had gotten in so much trouble with his family and like had a really hard time maintaining relationships. That's where I got some of those quotes earlier.
Yeah.
He just didn't care. Like it never occurred to him to be anybody else than what he was. The desire to fit in was never there. And he got in a lot of trouble for just sticking out. And it kind of became like this sticking point for him, is he's going to stick out no matter what. So he's going to lean into it. One of the members of the Mattachine Society, Randy Wicker, who had marched in the first gay picket lines before the White House in 1965, said, "The Screaming Queens forming chorus lines and kicking went against everything that I wanted people to think about homosexuals, that we were a bunch of drag queens in the village acting disorderly and tacky and cheap."
I don't see always, but like gay men, man, like specifically the white gay men are just so hard to overcome as keeping their own community. Like, this is the acceptable kind of gay. Be gay like me or shut up. And I'm just like, no.
Yeah, I'm trying to find, let's see. He was an interesting person. So he was part of the Stonewall Riots. He was really embarrassed about all of this stuff. He said, "All I could think was, oh my God, they're going to burn up a little old Italian lady, or some child is going to be killed, and we're going to be the boogeymen of the 70s.
I'm not like fully shitting on him, but it definitely is like respectability politics of the 70s, right. Basically. Like,
so he had been part of the Mattachine Society. He was really embarrassed for the way that things went. But then a week or two later, he was in a July 4th parade or something, like one of the, a pride march somewhere else.
Yeah.
He was in New York. Or no, it was in New Jersey. And he convinced like 10 couples to be able to hold hands with each other, which the Mattachine had never done. They don't allow you to like have any physical affection, because they're just like other people, right? Normal people don't hold hands with members of the same sex. Normal people don't kiss each other. But he got 10 couples to hold hands with each other, and the society freaked out on him. And so he went home and joined a different movement, helped found a different movement.
Okay. Snaps for that guy.
Yeah, kind of.
Small ones.
When the neighborhood paper, The Village Voice, ran the storied coverage of the riots of the former weekend, they had less than flattering things to say. So the mob gathered back around and threatened to burn the Village Voice to the ground.
I love that. Like, fuck you. Don't present this disingenuously or we'll burn your shit down too.
Yeah, like, are you fucking kidding us? The crowd grew to over 500 people, some of them their own groups, little subgroups, curious to understand how this particular crowd had managed to win against conflicts with the police so much over the last few days.
Mm-hmm.
There were also obviously the bullshit people that we have in every peaceful protest, where they're just going to destroy shit and make it look like it was the actual activist group and not these shitty people.
Right.
But I digress. That's what we do here, though. We digress. We do that a lot. We're supposed
continue to digress.
5 more people were arrested when violence broke out. More confrontation with the police resulted in injury to both sides. This altercation lasted only an hour, but the message was clear. We're not going to take it anymore. Storme was part of early activism groups, and I'm going to talk a lot of... This is so good. I'm going to talk a lot about the hilarious fucking dramas of these groups in the next episode. They're so...
I love gay drama.
It's like a soap opera. I swear to God, it's like a soap opera learning about all of these different groups and like how they slowly destroyed each other and how just bitchy they were to everyone else. Just crazy.
Drama happened.
Drama happened. Lots and lots of drama. It's a fucking soap opera. Storme was a part of early activism groups, and sometimes these came together, and she really loved being part of shows for battered women and children. Once someone made the colossally dick mistake of asking why these people, and she would respond, somebody has to care. It's very simple.
Yeah.
If people didn't care about me when I was growing up, with my mother being Black, raised in the South, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Greenwich Village, which was her neighborhood, and I mentioned this before, and I'm going to say it again, she was this wonderful gay superhero. Chelsea Hotel was her home, and in the late 80s and 90s, she was a bouncer in that little nook of her life. She patrolled until she was 85, or in real people years, 2005.
Yeah.
She was bouncing and patrolling until 2005, which is fucking awesome.
I love that. So for people who don't know, the few people that listen to our episodes, Lauren does the like big chunks of our research, and then I just kind of like follow along, ask a couple of questions and whatnot. So typically when we're doing this, I just pull up the Wikipedia page of whatever I'm doing to like look for little things that I might want to ask or like flesh out. And really the main thing that's standing out now is the New York Times writing an obituary for her. And like including it in their paper is just like, I know she died in 2014, right? And so obviously things had changed, but just like to see a mixed lesbian woman have an obituary in the New York Times, and the paragraph that they chose to feature in the Wikipedia article is about her like walking the streets and protecting them, checking in at lesbian bars. So I think that's really cute. Just wonderful, tall, androgynous, and armed. Like that's how they start the sentence, and I'm just like, that's beautiful.
It is absolutely gorgeous. As happens with most of these badasses, her real effect on the gay community was not well recognized in any official capacity until much later in her life. She became a member of the Stonewall Veteran Association, serving as the Chief of Security Ambassador, and then in 1998, Vice President.
Ooh.
She was honored in 2012 by the Brooklyn Pride at the premiere of Storme, the Lady of the Jewel Box, which was a cute little film that they made about her life. And in 2014, she was honored by Brooklyn Community Pride Center for her fearlessness and bravery, which she certainly was.
Yeah.
In 2010, Storme was diagnosed with dementia. For 4 years, she sat in a nursing home, thinking she was a child again, or really reliving the Stonewall days. Her mind was active, if not in the present, and she died of a heart attack in her sleep on May 24th, 2014. Since then, her name has been shared more and more. The bravery and fearlessness of her actions have helped tens of millions of people have the ability to accept a small part of themselves, and we all have to thank her for the androgynous fashions that people are just allowed to rock now.
Yeah.
Thanks to Storme, the drag king of the Jewel Box Revue.
Thanks, Storme. What a terrible way to die.
She had a legal guardian. Like, she didn't even have family.
Wow. I have, I don't have any, like, real fears remaining around the prospect of dying, but, like, my big fears around, like, losing my memories and stuff like that, like dementia and Alzheimer's, those both are big fears with mine. So, it always hits really hard.
Are you predisposed to it? I
don't know. I don't have anybody that I know of that's like blood related that's been diagnosed, so I don't think so. That's what I was going to say. I am somehow like slightly comforted by the fact that Stonewall was one of the things that like weathered the dementia for her, you know?
Yeah, I would imagine there was probably a lot of Diana in there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
But at least they were good dates. At least she was reliving, happy. I would imagine at the time they probably weren't very happy. They were probably...
But powerful. Like, she had memories of her being powerful. And, I wouldn't
she worked until she couldn't anymore. Like, she helped the community as long as she physically and mentally could, which is
you said until 2005, and then in 2010 is when she entered the nursing home. So I mean, that's only a 5-year time span
of just hanging out.
Yeah, and she was 85, so Lord knows she'd earned it.
Can I sit down now?
Yeah, tie. Are there other lesbians to take care of the lesbians now?
Can other lesbians start beating up people? I'm done. I just want to be done for just a little bit.
Yeah. I want to watch that film.
The Lady of the Jewel Box.
I think that'd be cute.
Yeah. But that's it. That's Storme.
They don't even... I feel like No, I'm not. Okay. Like on the Wikipedia page for Storme, they don't even mention Marcia and Sylvia.
Yeah, because their paths really only intersect during Stonewall. That's really why I didn't talk about Marcia, and I didn't talk really about Sylvia that much this episode, because of the fact that Stonewall is really the nexus event that all three of them are known for. And so I'm doing all three of them as kind of their point of contact.
I didn't realize that, I think, was the piece I didn't.
You thought she was like one of the besties?
I thought they were like best buddies. Yeah.
Yeah. No, she was just a lesbian in the area. And I would imagine, since she was part of like the GLF, the Gay Liberation Force, and probably the Gay Alliance Association in those early days. So I would imagine that there was a part of her story that included the exclusion of trans people and gender nonconforming, since she was very much a lesbian. Part of me hopes, most of me hopes that wouldn't be the case, since she was a drag king and she was so involved in the drag scene that she would be a little more inclusive. And as much information as I got on her about all of the activism groups that she was a part of, they say early activism, but it was really hard to, I kind of had to make the assumption that she was part of the Gay Liberation Front and the Gay Activist Alliance. Mm-hmm. But they don't really include that information in her early activism days. And I wonder if that's probably because she was more focused on still being like a bouncer and, protecting the area. Yeah.
I think my main curiosity around it was because she dressed so androgynous, and I know that she was a lesbian, but sometimes if you present non-conforming, there's crossroads. So I was just wondering. Yeah.
Yeah.
We shall never know.
Next week, we're going to talk about Sylvia Rivera.
Yeah. Close out our Pride Month episodes.
With a big old bang.
Yeah, and then
she is
talking about spies.
Pardon?
The lady I sent you, I can't remember her name because I feel like a dodo bird. Emma Goldman, Russian Jewish anarchist and feminist, advocate of free speech, 8-hour workday, and birth control. I'm excited for that episode at some point.
Okay. We're also going to do, because I learned about it in one of the years in the future episode that we're going to do the bitch of Buchenwald.
Yeah. Yeah.
Buchenwald. I don't know how to pronounce it, and I don't give a shit.
Sure.
So.
I'm excited for that too, just not because she was a great person, but because I want to take any opportunity to rag on Nazis that I can.
Yeah, I specifically did text Kyria about this, and I said, hey, how do you feel about doing research on Nazis? And it was, we have to show that our views and their views were not the same thing. And I was like, so you mean
absolutely.
That I can talk about Nazis and I can shit talk about Nazis? I can do that. Fine with that.
History of one of my favorite periods in history, mostly because the involvement of the bureaucracy and how Nazi Germany came to be, and how they pretty much did everything by letter of the law, by just changing laws and stuff. Like it's a very compelling story for me. So one of my favorite time periods in history, and then I get to shit on Nazis. So great. Yeah, let's do it.
I was actually fascinated with that time period in high school as well. Like I read a lot about the Holocaust. Because it was one of those like morbid.
Yeah.
Fuck, did 6 million people die? Like how did we get from what they were to that? And it just fascinated me for endless reasons. I'm still fascinated by that time period because it really was just and people could see it coming, and it was like they couldn't do anything about it.
In the Black Plague episodes that I'm listening to for Last Pod, they apparently, I did not know this, like ever since Christianity became a thing, they have scapegoated the Jewish community. So even the Black Plague in France, they turned on their Jewish neighbors in the 1300s, saying that the Jewish neighbors were the ones who brought the Black Plague. I was just like, Jesus Christ. We truly never change.
We don't get any better. Technology has advanced. Humanity has not. Thank you for joining us, and we will come back and record another one and talk about Sylvia Rivera as the closeout of our official, non-official Pride Month, every day in your heart.
We don't care about the timeline of Pride because we are priding all day.
Pride is timeless.
Yeah. We love you guys. We will talk to you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye. Have a good day.